arms work just as hard as our legs. Fire up your triceps.
Your hips are dipping, always the option to come down to the knee.
Not as a weakness, but as a sense of strength, something that's empowering.
Namaste.
Hi guys, Katy here. Today I want to show you some half pigeon options. So half pigeon is probably one of people's top favorite poses or top least favorite poses, depending on who you are and how your hips are. But a lot of my students really love half pigeon. And I know when I first started my yoga practice, it was the only pose I actually enjoyed. I pretty much hated all of the rest of yoga, but I was so happy when we got towards the end of class and I got to do half pigeon because I could have stayed there all day long. But I do see a lot of issues that happen in half pigeon as far as people being uncomfortable and not knowing how to modify or when to modify. So basically today I want to just go over some safety and alignment things with half pigeon that will maybe make you a little bit more comfortable or help support you in areas where you need a little bit of extra TLC. So with half pigeon, we're going to start from just getting our shin set up. So typically for half pigeon, we start from downward facing dog. We'll lift the right leg high and then bringing the shin forward, we're gonna take our right knee towards our right wrist and our right ankle towards our left wrist. Now the reason I say towards is it's gonna depend a lot on your knee joint as to where your shin lines up. So a lot of teachers I've heard are very much sticklers in that your shin should eventually be parallel with the top of your mat. I don't subscribe to that school of thought just because if you have knee issues, if you've had knee surgery, like a lot of my students have, it's just not safe or not gonna happen in some people's bodies. So if you can get your shin towards parallel with the top of your mat, you're gonna flex your toes towards your kneecap. So just like we do in poses like figure 4 or one-legged mountain pose, it's to help protect the ligaments in our knee joint. And then from here, if that feels okay on our shin, we would fold down. Now if that again is not happening, if we have knee issues or it's just uncomfortable, because a lot of people it is, maybe our shin is more towards our hip flexor, our toes pointing towards our hip flexor, more of a 45-degree angle instead of being totally parallel. So if that's the case with your shin, you're gonna flex your toes in towards your hip. So you've got a nice long line across your ankle. You're not sending those toes towards the knee like we would if our shin was more parallel. We're kind of taking the toes down to the floor. So again, once we get set up here, we would come down onto our arms if we wanted to. Now, something I also see here is not having that ankle over far enough towards the wrist. So I'll see people take the knee and fold the ankle right under. So you're essentially stacking on top of your leg. Now, as you fold down, if you were to, this is gonna put a lot of pressure on your knee. So your ankle should not be under you, it should be over to the side. And again, if it's not coming very far, that's okay. You just don't wanna tuck it directly under, like I see some people new to half pigeon do. Also, when it comes to hip alignment, sometimes we tend to get our shin nice and set up. We've got our shin either parallel or towards a 45. We get here nice and successful. Then when we start to fold down, we just kind of collapse onto the side. So when we do that, we've taken away this hip stretch and we're not really doing a whole lot of anything, to be honest. So if you find that you can't keep, so ideally we want to keep our hips stacked level, so we're not rolling onto that side that has the leg forward. If you find that that's challenging for your low back or just your range of motion, you can always take a block or a blanket and place it under that hip that has the leg forward. So then when you fold forward, you're still supported and you're still gonna get that hip stretch that we're looking for along the outside of our hip and our glute. So you can just hold there with a block underneath you, nice and supportive. If you find that maybe you're ready to take that block away and you can keep the hips level, awesome. And it's nice to have that little prop. You can also use a blanket if you don't have a block or if a blanket feels better. Another thing that I see is going too much in the other direction. So if we have the shin forward, I just switched sides so that you can see my hip on this side.
Another thing I see is if we start to shift onto our ankle. I don't see this one as much, but I do see it some. So if we start to put a lot of our body weight as we fold down onto our ankle or our heel, it can start to kind of tweak our knee. So we shouldn't ideally be dumping into either side of our hips. Think about keeping your sacrum, that little flat area above your tailbone, right at your low back. Think about keeping your sacrum level. So trying not to dump into one hip or dump into the other hip, keeping your back level. Another little tiny adjustment I see, it's not really gonna hurt you honestly, but it's gonna just be better for you over time, is the toes on the back. Sometimes sickling inwards or doing weird things with the toes on the back foot. Toes should be straight out from your ankle, pointing right behind you. Now, if half pigeon doesn't agree with your knee, or if you've got really tight hips, a lot of men I see, half pigeon, just not right for their bodies, and that's okay. If you fall into that category of knee surgeries, things like that, you can always do half pigeon variation on your back. So this is called supine pigeon or supine figure 4, just meaning that you're laying down when you're doing it. It's gonna stretch the same part of your body. So to do this, we take our right ankle over our left thigh, right toes flex towards the right knee. So just like when we were taking our shin forward to parallel, in order to protect our knee, we're flexing those toes, keeping our leg nice and engaged. Then right hand is gonna go through the center of our legs, left hand to the outer left thigh. Also, if we have trouble grabbing around, we can also use a strap. I do that with some of my students too. You can take a strap. So taking the legs in as much to the chest as feels comfortable. Once you feel that stretch right through here, you're gonna stop and hold and breathe into it. Now notice if your jaw starts to clench or tighten in any of these hip opening variations, whether it's half pigeon or supine pigeon, relax your face, relax your jaw. Once you've held and had a few breaths, you'll do that same thing on the other side. So this time left ankle would come over the right thigh, flexing the toes, left hand through the middle, hold and breathe here into center. So it's accessing the same part of our hips, but we're not putting nearly as much pressure on our knees, or if we're just uncomfortable with not sure where we're supposed to be in our half pigeon or how we can modify, it's just a little bit safer way of doing that same hip opening stretch. So I hope that helps you a little bit with your half pigeon. Again, it's one of my favorite poses. If it's not one of your favorites, maybe some of these modifications will help you learn to love it. If you'd like to tune in to more modifications or different poses, please subscribe to my channel. You can also like it, or if you have any suggestions for poses you'd like to see, leave me a comment. I'd love to give you what you need to know. Thanks, guys.
you.